I hope you're well. I just thought I would try something a little bit different to see how it works. I've got some lovely new cards. They're I Ching cards. They're the Los Scarabeo I Ching cards, which have got beautiful pictures of sort of vintage Oriental, particularly ancient Chinese images on them. And I thought maybe, given that it is the Lionsgate portal this week and we have had this incredible Jupiter-Neptune sextile, that it might be worth doing an I Ching for the collective to see what the energies of this week kind of hold, and what we can transmute, heal, potentially create, or kind of birth now with this one, this wonderful energy coming in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shuffle the I Ching cards, and I'm going to choose a hexagram like that instead of throwing the coins. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these coins to throw for the changing lines. So a little bit of a different approach to the usual I Ching. I'm a massive fan of the I Ching. I hope that the Shen spirits won't find this disrespectful, but I'm going to sort of try and do something a little bit different. So I'm going to, as I say, use the cards to shuffle, and then sort of do the changing lines afterwards, rather than construct the hexagram by throwing the coins. So let's begin the shuffle and see what wants to come out. So as I say, my question to first of all the Shen, the wise ancestors, and also to the star beings and guardians that are overseeing the process of the Lionsgate portal, as well as the spirits of Jupiter and Neptune, just to ask them for some wisdom, guidance, healing and clarity this week, given how tumultuous this energy has been, particularly with that Mercury Mars square and that Venus Neptune square that sort of almost had the potential to distort the energy, the pure energy of that Jupiter Neptune sextile. So it's just asking for some guidance, some wisdom, messages for the collective for this week, and see what comes through. Okay, so I'm going to cut the way that I would for the tarot. Interesting. So this is the hexagram associated with Yin energy. So this is the second hexagram of the entire I Ching, and the thing about the I Ching is that it is cosmological. It's not. It's an oracle that is actually based in the cosmological processes that govern sort of change and birth and death and destruction within the 3D world. So it's also what connects heaven and earth. So in that sense, I find it really interesting that it works with 5 elements. It doesn't just work with 4. So in a way, you could say that it works with the quintessence, the 5th element, ether, which in astrology is associated with the planets. So it kind of brings together these two things. So Yin energy, interesting. Yin is all about the feminine aspect. So this is receptivity, it is attraction, it is kind of going with the flow, it's ease, it's grace, it's allowing kind of energy. So that in itself, I think, is really quite interesting. I think it's kind of saying to us that we need to open up to the energies that are currently being beamed to the earth from the portals of Sirius and Orion, particularly Sirius, which the Theosophists, call the feminine or the central sun, and allow these new energies sort of in. But let's do the changing lines to see what else comes through before I say anything more. So we've only got a changing line at the fourth position. Right, so let's have a look. So let's start first of all with a little booklet that comes with the deck, because it's actually got some quite pithy things in it. So Hexagram 2. So this is Kun, the receptive, which is about obedience and meekness that will lead to success. And I think maybe not obedience, that's quite sort of confusion, but I think it's just this idea of allowing, of kind of going with the flow. So diplomacy and conscious subservience are the correct behavior. If kindness and meekness prevail over conceit, long-lasting gratification will occur. So I think this is just about cultivating divine feminine energy, not being necessarily passive, but it's what they would call sort of conscious allowing. So let's have a look to see what the changing line is. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but this is the book that I tend to use. It's Stephen Karcher's Total I Ching, and the reason that I like this book so much is because it takes into consideration the oldest forms of interpretation of the I Ching. So he takes it back to the days when it used to be a moon oracle that women used to perform, as opposed to the cracked shell of the turtle, which then sort of fed into kind of Confucian thinking, which can be a little bit patriarchal. So I quite like the Total I Ching because it brings back that feminine sort of aspect to the oracle. So he calls number 2 the field or yielding. So this is the earth altar, which interestingly he describes as being in a grove of mulberry trees. So this is really, in a way, almost like the tree at the foot of the world, the altar at the foot of the world tree. And he says that it is the dark animal goddess and her divinatory tradition, which is the I Ching, and of course most lunar traditions. This is the flow. So this is the flow of life, the universal flow of life, the river of life. So he said field is part of a pair that forms 2 of the gates of change. The first being the dragon, which is the yang energy, the creative, and then this being the field or the yielding. So this is the yin energy. So it supplies security and brings things to a good end through the mare. So this is the female horse. She is autumn, harvest, the river mountain, marriage ceremonies, sacrifices at the earth altar, home of the spirit that protects, assures fertility and harvest and wards off disaster. From this center, sacrifices offered to river and the underworld waters and to mountain. So in other words, to the elements of water and earth, which are both yin, and mountain, who connects with heaven and the 4 directions naturally, because it's earth. The 4 sides or hidden lands of the square field of earth. An age-old tradition underlies this. This is the tradition of the dark animal goddess or valley spirit that goes back into the Neolithic, often symbolized as jade and jade objects. So I'm actually wearing a jade bracelet. And so I'm going to put this here because I think it's good to actually see jade. It is very beautiful. And it's what I love about it is that it sort of combines green and sort of the brown earth colors so beautifully, so delicately. So it suggests, and I hope I'm saying this right, the new Gua, the one who made our bodies, and the two, the couple who protect us. So this is the kind of the primordial couple, which underpins everything in the cosmos. So from the idea of heaven and earth being the cosmic couple, to the sort of Adam and Eve figures, almost the cosmic pair that represent sort of the whole human race. So then he quotes from something called the Way Power Classic, which says, "The valley spirit never dies. It is named Dark Animal Goddess. The door of the Dark Animal Goddess is called the root of heaven and earth. Like an endless thread she endures. You can call upon her easily. He who has found this mother understands he is a child. When he understands he is her child and clings to her, he will be without danger when the body dies." So I find this extremely moving, given that, I don't know whether, well, this week I watched that documentary, Planet of the Humans, which I found deeply, deeply distressing and heartbreaking. There's no other way to kind of put it, at what we humans have done to Mother Earth. And honestly, I challenge anyone to watch that last scene with the deforestation of all these trees and this dying orangutan, which has died because humans have removed all the forest and therefore their source of shelter and food, and not feel deep sadness and anger for Mother Earth, and for how we've sort of disrespected her. And I really feel strongly that this particular Lionsgate portal is really about calling us back to this deep understanding of how we are an expression of Earth. We are her children, that we live in the biosphere, which is a living, breathing presence. This is the world soul that Plato talked about. And I think until we come back to that understanding, we're just not going to do what is required to kind of to not just save ourselves, but to sort of save her, to repair the damage that we've done to her body over these last, few centuries, you know. So I really feel that the Dark Animal Goddess is sort of bringing us back to the Earth Mother, the presence of the Earth Mother, which is this kind of primordial field out of which we all are birthed in terms of our physical bodies. You know, we're all kind of spirit beings, but when we are born into the earth plane, we are born into the body of the Mother Earth, and we are an extension of her body. And I think until we kind of come back to that understanding of our relationship to her, we're kind of lost. But anyway, I think before I continue any further, it's probably a good idea to have a look at the changing line, because that will often give us more information about the hexagram itself, and sometimes alter the meaning sort of slightly, make it more precise. So if I'm reading now from Stephen Karcher's The I Ching, Plain and Simple. He says, 6 at the 4th, bundled in the bag, without fault, without praise. And then his interpretation is, a time pregnant with possibility. There is nothing to praise or blame. What you desire is already there. Consider things carefully. So I think from that, what he's kind of saying is that this moment, this period of time, essentially has a lot of potential kind of wrapped in it. After all, this is the kind of, it's the marriage of the divine feminine and the divine masculine in terms of the spiritual and the physical suns, this 888 portal. So it's a coming together of the yin and the yang. And the yin is essentially the sort of fertile potential of the earth, the kind of the field of possibility from which we can manifest. And it's also the sort of the creative power of the earth, as in similar to a tilled field, you know, that you can plant your seeds in, and you know, things can grow from it. So I think he's kind of saying that it's neutral, and that you can do with this energy what you want. I mean, here we've got a slightly more in-depth interpretation. So here he says, field bundled in the bag, the fertile chaos. So this is the kind of primordial field out of which everything manifests. Without fault, without praise. So he says, careful consideration won't harm you. Grain in bags, hidden potentials. This is the originating chaos. The situation is pregnant with possibilities. There is nothing to blame or to praise, so it's neutral energy. For what you want is already there. So in other words, it's this field of possibility from which anything can be sort of manifested, either positive or negative. And it's interesting because if we have a look at what the hexagram changes into, it changes into hexagram 16. I think this is just so beautiful. I don't know if you can see, but it's actually a kind of a drawing of ginkgo biloba leaves. The herb, you know, the tree ginkgo biloba. Notice that both of these are redolent with tree symbology. So we've got the tree here, the world tree, the axis mundi, and then we've got the leaves of the sort of ginkgo biloba tree, which of course is very healing. So anyway, so hexagram 16 is called providing for. It's also known, and this one I absolutely love, is called riding the elephant. And so Karcher explains that this is about providing for a joyous response. So he talks about the elephant as being like a great being who can be humble and respond to the commands of heaven, riding the elephant. So it's talking about you know, this idea of almost standing on a great force, riding the back of this great force. If you think about the earth as being this enormously powerful kind of force, but which is also very gentle and benign. You know, elephants don't move quickly. They are matriarchal, you know, in terms of their social structure. And they're very intelligent, but they're also very, generally speaking, very peaceful. And they move very quietly across the earth. They don't make a great noise. So they're very graceful creatures. And so he talks here about learning to sort of work with this power that we all have kind of access to. We stand on the earth. We stand in the earth. We stand in the biosphere. And so in terms of our roots, our feet are kind of connected to this enormous field, this force. We're kind of rooted into the earth. And so I think that they want us to see the earth as being like this elephant. So it talks about activating unconscious creative powers, which builds the strength for spontaneous responses. And this is about responses, kind of natural responses to whatever, you know, crosses our path, kind of good or bad, that we accumulate virtue, or we accumulate what we need, so that no matter what circumstances bring us, we can respond spontaneously. So we're in that flow, that sort of flow of grace. And he talks about, he says, the name of this figure evokes you, the great, which centers around building up the ability to respond directly, joyously, spontaneously, and effectively to any situation, a quality that was highly valued and regarded in the ancient world. It depicts gathering reserves of energy and grace into a store of power and virtue from which you can respond without thought, so you know exactly what to do. And this, of course, requires not just being very in tune with the earth, but also in tune with our own intuitive abilities. So he says this is the sort of training involved in the martial arts and many performing arts, a kind of subcortical patterning whereby a corrected or straightened response becomes almost simultaneous with stimulus, bypassing the cerebral systems of rational choice. So in other words, it's kind of tapping into that intuitive ability we all have, which bypasses the kind of the monkey mind, the logical mind, which can often become connected to the ego mind, and then throw up all sorts of problems, make us question our intuition, and can be the source of enormous suffering if we let it. So it's really about fine-tuning our intuition, connecting it to our survival mechanisms, but not in a way that activates the reptilian brain in a negative way. So in other words, not activating those forces within us that create fear and that respond in terms of fight or flight. So it's bypassing the trauma response and going to the sort of the innate, the natural response that comes before any kind of conditioning happens. So it overrides those kind of fight or flight or paralysis responses, and kind of goes straight to this kind of reservoir of wisdom that we have within us that knows exactly how to respond in any given situation. So he says, the ability to respond directly and correctly allows you to enjoy the moment, to take pleasure in life. So in other words, it doesn't have to be this kind of contraction energy. It kind of goes with the flow and automatically responds, you know, in a way that doesn't get stuck. So he says the process is imaged as a child riding on an elephant, combining spontaneity with great power and grace in an emblem of a paradise state prior to the restrictions of culture. So exactly what I was saying about, to that sort of innate state that we all have when we first come into bodies, which is completely pure and has not been tainted yet by parental kind of conditioning, by experience here in the earth plane, by trauma, anything like that. And then he says the elephant was an omen animal widespread in ancient China, used in war and sacrifice. It was also used to mean symbol, the term that describes the divinatory figures of change, in other words the I Ching and the hexagrams, which became actually the first writing. So this is where writing actually developed from, and we forget this, that writing and letters are actually symbols. They're not literal, they are symbols, they are pictograms, just like hieroglyphics, and therefore have enormous power, and are kind of infinite in terms of the meaning that you can plumb from them. So he says, joyous response is a response to life. It indicates smooth moving with the flow or current, the moment when a spirit power spontaneously triggers other forces into action. And then the response from the image is, providing for a joyous response, ride the elephant, advantageous to install the lords, to move the legions, harvesting. So again, he says that this is about, and he actually breaks down the pictogram that is the origin of this particular hexagram, and he says it comes from the word you, which means take precautions, arrange for, make ready, happy, content, prepared for, joyous, pleasure, delight, spontaneous response, enthusiasm. And he says the old character shows a hand holding the shuttle of a loom, and an elephant, sign of grace, strength, and the hidden power of the great symbols. So I think that's really quite beautiful. I think it's kind of saying that, you know, there's no need to kind of panic. You know, there may be difficult times ahead, but if we take the necessary preparations now, then it will be a smoother transition, and we'll be able to we'll know instinctively what to do, you know, whatever kind of comes up. And I really love that, rather than kind of this sort of last minute panic response that we tend to have because we live so much, you know, in the kind of short term. So I think that's rather beautiful, and hopefully brings some comfort at a time of great uncertainty. I am going to be doing, you know, the upcoming individual forecasts for the full moon that happens on August the 3rd. So look out for those. But in the meantime, I hope this brings you some, you know, wisdom, clarity, healing, and, you know, resolution. And I'm sending you lots of love, and yes, we'll speak soon.